Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Steve Wolf. Welcome back to the Fire Break. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, and we're trying this new thing, the Fire Break Live. So, boy, now all the pressure's on us. I can't edit out if I mess something up. But you know what? I don't really care. I've got the amazing, the one and only Dr. Peter Mansi with us today, live from England, which used to be part of Europe, as some of you recall. And Dr. Mansi is probably I would say, one of the world's top fire investigators. If you remember Backdraft and you see the character that Bobby De Niro played, walking around pretending that fire was live, but nonetheless drawing some conclusions about what started the fire. That's what Dr. Mansi does, but the real version. Dr. Mansi, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
Thank you, Steve. Really good. We've got lovely weather over in London, which is unusual. So we're enjoying the sunshine.
Well, lovely, lovely. So I know you were just recently the president of the Central European Association of Fire Investigators.
Yes.
What do you do in that organization? Or I guess you were there for 5 years, so probably did a few things.
The European Association is a chapter of the International Association of Arson Investigators, which is a global organisation with 11,000 members around the world. So there's a chapter in Chile in South America, chapters in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and we started the European chapter back in 2019 to bring together the many countries that comprise Europe, where you might only have perhaps one or two investigators in that country that want to get involved in such an association, but they can't start their own chapter up. So it works well, and we're having our third conference, a 3-day conference this year in Barcelona in November, where we have one day where we actually do real fire burns to learn about fire behaviour and so on. So it's all good. It's good networking. It's good information sharing and sharing knowledge and experiences.
So at what point in your life did you decide that your curiosity about fire was going to dominate your career?
Well, it's an interesting question, that, Steve, I must say, because I had no intentions of ever joining the fire department. I didn't know anybody in the fire department. It didn't attract me. I wasn't too comfortable with heights and enclosed spaces. And I started life as a mechanical engineering draftsman and drawing things like heating, ventilating, air conditioning, sprinklers, boiler rooms, things like that. And then when I finished that 4-year apprenticeship, I thought, now I've grown up, I'm going to earn some good money and move on in the world. And they stuck me in an office, which was the biggest mistake they could have done, because I hate being in the office. I like being on the construction sites. And I heard an advert on a local radio station here in London for the London Fire Brigade. And I didn't know what it was. Just the preamble attracted my attention. And I thought, that sounds like I'm going to enjoy that. So I applied and got in. And I served just over 30 years in the London Fire Brigade before retiring in December 2011 and starting our own consultancy, Fire Investigations UK. So, it frightens me to think I'm sort of 42 plus years in the fire industry, and I still only feel about 30, Steve. That's the problem.
Wow. So you totally didn't expect to be in this career, but yet one thing led to another. You stayed in it. You rose up in the ranks, became president of several organizations. So you don't get that way by luck, right? You get by that way with a lot of drive and a lot of curiosity. And I would imagine over the last 30 some odd years, I'll just round it down for you, that you've seen things change in the fire space. Can you tell me about how are things different now than they used to be?
Well, the good news is that when I first joined the fire brigade and throughout UK and different parts of the world, there were lots of fires. There was lots of fatalities and injuries due to fire, and fire departments around the world really changed their tack to be more preventative. And the saying prevention is better than cure is true, and firefighters were then encouraged to go, and they still do it now here in London and in the UK, go and do what they call home fire safety visits. So they may go to somebody's home and ask them if they've got a fire plan, an escape plan, talk to the children if they have as well. They get involved with schools doing this sort of work. They even install free smoke detectors, just make people think about it. And we've certainly seen it's worked. Also, with that as well, Steve, is there's an issue of perhaps landlords that own properties now have to conform to quite stringent electrical safety checks and gas safety checks, and that has all helped bring down the amount of fires there are. So, and the amount of fire deaths. So it does work, but the way to learn from fire is understand how they start in the first place, which is where we come in to identify the causes of fires, and perhaps a design fault or a failure in a component part in a piece of equipment, and get that taken off the market or get it checked. And but you can only do that by sharing the information that you find in your investigations. So yeah, it's good to see that fires have come down. I mean, I often present different parts of the world, and there might be 20 people there might be 300, and I will often say, put your hand up if you've ever had a fire that has involved the fire department turning up to your work or your home. And not many people do, if any. Not many people do. And there we are. So they say, oh, I had a friend that had a fire, or occasionally someone does. And if they say, I have, first thing I say is, and it was frightening, wasn't it? So it goes to show that we're trying to spread this fire safety message to people that probably never experienced in their life. But of course, we're seeing it all the time. And it's just important not to frighten people, but just to make them aware.
I see. And even though the likelihood of having a fire would be put into the range of, well, if there were a fire at your home, absolutely, you're more likely to get compliance or safety if you say, when there's a fire in your home, yeah, what's your plan?
Yeah, and that is it. And because people, I mean, I was a bit of a bore with my 4 children as they grew up, and I was learning about some of these nightclub fires and so on. I said to them, I know it's boring, I know you don't want to think about it, but when you go to a nightclub or a venue, before you have a drink or you relax and let your hair down and really have a good time, just look at where the fire exits are. Because when something goes wrong, it goes wrong quickly, and everyone tends to go out the way they come in. So just look at where they are, and when if something goes wrong, you will react because it's already in the back of your mind. So it's but yeah, it's because
that wasn't entirely clear to me. You lost me at the point where you said let your hair down.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so we're getting, you said if you see something unsafe, you try to take it off the market or remediate it. In the case of the battery fires that we're seeing now, it's really not an option to take them off the market. It seems like EVs, etc., they're here to stay until something replaces them that's better.
Yeah.
So the alternative now is, new methods to suppress those fires. And it seems like we're not very far along the path of new suppression technology for EV battery fires yet, are we?
No, we're not, Steve. And it is I'm often asked this question, and what's the best way to control these batteries if they go into thermal runaway? It is so difficult. It's like a firework going off in your pocket. I mean, you can't stop it once it goes. So how do you contain it and suppress it? And there's lots of different techniques out there with these massive fire blankets that go over a vehicle and sort of slow down that fire spread to other vehicles, for instance. But I haven't used one myself in anger, but I'm sure that there's a lot of positives with them. I just instinctively think, well, you're trapping all these volatiles and chemicals under a blanket. Is that going to, have an adverse effect on perhaps some of the people close by? But they seem to be used by several fire departments. And you're right. I don't think we are any closer to controlling this. I did a double-decker bus fire that had something like 24,000 battery cells in it, and of course it only takes 2 to short out or 1 to go into thermal runaway, and it took out, I think it was 5 buses in all once it got going.
Wow.
And each battery pack of these cells was sort of protected with a dielectric fluid, which is meant to cool it down. Sensors in the battery packs to let somebody know that they're getting hot. But once it starts running away, what can you do? You've got to cool them down, and
Right.
to do that, you've got to have access to them and to get to that cell. Because, yeah, you're right. Well, I don't know what the solution is to this, but as you say, taking them off the market, what we're seeing is a lot of fires with the scooters, because the battery pack is low down. So the guys and girls that are going around on these scooters will be going up and down curbs, and that battery's getting impact damage, and prone to going to thermal runaway. And I know a lot of transport systems around the world, certainly in London, on the London Underground, have banned them from going on there. And the unicycles, again, the batteries are low down, they're getting the damage. And also with the retrofit electric bike kits that people are doing themselves. They're sort of unregulated, cheap imports from different parts of the planet, and don't really see so many with the purpose-built bikes by reputable companies that are putting in good cells. And it's the battery management system that is the key to all this, to be able to shut that down when it starts to go wrong. And that battery management system detects it, says something wrong here, shut it down before it goes wrong. And of course, you get what you pay for. Some of these cheap imports just don't have that advanced technology within them because it's expensive.
Right. A friend of mine is working on a technology for battery fire suppression that involves the use of liquid nitrogen and dry ice to basically drop the battery down to, in the minus 300 range, where that reaction simply can't propagate.
Yeah.
Have you experimented at all with cryosuppression?
No, never. I'd love to. I like setting fires and enjoy learning how they grow and develop. One of the things that I've been complimented on and criticised by one guy somewhere in the world, I think he was from Ireland. Each year I set fire to our Christmas tree after Christmas in the garden, to demonstrate that I know that there are some safety campaigns saying if you water your Christmas tree, it will be safe and won't burn so quickly.
Because the oils will disappear by adding some water to the root system.
Yeah, it's actually not true, because certainly in the UK we'll get our Christmas trees imported from the Nordic countries, so you've got a transport time and they're cut. So there's no roots, so how the water's going to suck up, I don't know. But anyway, I've tried everything.
Right.
I've drilled into the bottom, I've cross-cut it, and I've put it in the water, and I keep topping it up. And the needles don't fall off as much, but the difference in weight between when I put it in, I can hardly lift a 7-foot tree. It's when I take it out with one hand. And that's been standing in water for a month. And I've had some fire safety professionals say to me, well, you shouldn't have it for a month. I said, well, but that's what we do. We buy it normally about the 6th of January, something like that. And it comes down by the 6th of December, comes down by the 6th of January. So you can have it for 3 or 4 weeks, some people have it for 2 weeks. But anyway, I'll then put it out in my garden, and I put a tiny little firelighter at the bottom to simulate perhaps a transformer fire. or
Right.
an LED driver fire or something like that. And this thing, Steve, it's frightening every time. It's frightening how quickly this goes up, and the flame height, 7-foot tree, is going at least 20 foot, and it's so quick. And my message, I've put it on YouTube. My message is simply: if you see a flame in your real Christmas tree, you're going to freeze for a second, and the next second you get everybody out and shut the door, because you're not going to fight it. No smoke detector is going to save you.
Right.
So it's not to frighten people, but it's just to. So I'll do this each year. I think I'll stop now. I've done it for 5 years. I think the message is there. I'll find something else to burn.
So have you done experiments with either spraying a retardant that has like potassium citrate in it on the tree, or even putting it into the water so that the tree might draw up a retardant?
I have not. I did have somebody contact me to say that they had a fire retardant that would work on trees, and I said, please send it to me, and I'm happy to demonstrate it next year and see if it works. But no, I was at a seminar about 2 weeks ago. I don't know what the magic ingredient is, but a guy that I was talking to showed me on his phone a video of an oil pan fire at the UK Fire Service College. They did a demonstration. And it was a 6 litre, looked like a water extinguisher with an additive in it. So I think it's 60 or 7% water. It's got this additive. And this oil tray fire, it's about 20-foot diameter. It's a massive, massive oil tray. And when I was at the Fire Service College, we would use it and use foam to bring the foam across the top of it, and then you could break it, and then the fire would start up again. He put this out in probably 10 to 15 seconds. The whole thing was out, and it didn't reignite, and there must have been 30, 40 fire officers standing there watching. And I said, I'm sure they were impressed with that. He said they were totally amazed at what they just saw. And he said it's going to be a game changer. Well, I think, Steve, we've heard that forever, haven't we? This is going to be a game changer.
Right.
And it's supposed to be used on all classes of fire.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see.
Do you remember who showed you that?
Sorry?
Do you remember who showed you that?
Yeah, I've got his card. I've got his name.
I'll have to follow up with him.
Yeah, I shall certainly. Yeah, I shall drop him a line. No, I haven't got it here. But yeah, I know the guy. I actually sat on a panel with him, a discussion panel, talking about super yacht fires, and I was really talking about the toys that are brought on board the super yachts. So you know, you've got these multi-million-pound beautiful vessels, all open plan, state of the art design, and they're bringing on the e-scooters and so on and so forth, and just plug them in, no battery management whatsoever. The toys that they're bringing on, the sea bobs and the surfboards, and they've got decent sized battery packs, but they don't manage them. I mean, when the drones started coming out and people could use them for work over here, you had to be registered with the Civil Aviation Authority. So I've got a drone pilot's license, and part of that was I had 4 batteries. I had to number them, I had to have a logbook for them, I had to do a pre-flight, post-flight check of the battery cell, the physical condition, the state of charge before and after the flight, and how long it flew for. And it's as boring as hell to do this, but when a battery when a battery starts failing, it stands out, it jumps out. You think there's something wrong with this battery cell.
I see.
You remove it. No, I don't know anyone that's doing this on these super yachts. We're having these massive fires, and often, I mean, it's the easy thing to blame if you can't find the cause. Is well, it occurred in the garage. It had to be the electric surfboard because it's got lithium-ion batteries in it. But
Right.
It would help if people took them a little bit more seriously. But again, you know, Steve, you say to people, don't plug your phone in at night. Guilty. And
Right.
I shouldn't, you know, because it's a life of convenience, isn't it?
It is. And to what degree do phones represent a danger compared to some of the other battery sources?
Well, again, it's when they get damaged. You know, if someone...
I see. Physical damage.
Yeah, you see, this phone's got cracked screens, and you think, well, how did it get that? Did it drop from a height, or someone stamp on it? We had a young lad that had serious burns to his leg. He had his phone in his pocket, and the phone went into thermal. The battery went into thermal runaway. So we had the remains of the phone, and we X-rayed it before we took it apart. And inside was a tiny, tiny little grub screw that. The reason it got there, we then found out that the young lad had the battery replaced at a local sort of phone shop about 2 weeks before. So the guy obviously couldn't find the grub screw, compressed it between the phone body and the battery pouch, and the screw eventually punctured the separator.
I see.
And off it went, you know. So, but you don't often hear phones. One of the first jobs I did when I retired from London Fire Brigade was for, and it's in the public domain, so it's on their website. Was for Samsung, and they were launching the Samsung S3. It always makes me laugh. I gauge how old I am by which Samsung is out at the moment. You see, and the Samsung S3, and I thought, wow, this will be good. Getting a job for Samsung. We've only just started, and it was a young lad in Ireland had put on a blog that he was driving along and his Samsung Galaxy S3 burst into flames. Wasn't plugged in, wasn't on charge. That's unusual. What Samsung didn't tell us is they were launching the S3 in Brazil. This was on a Thursday. They were launching it in Brazil after the weekend, and they postponed it for until we come up with the answers. So I looked at this in all sorts of ways, and they give me loads of phones, and cut a long story short, I ended up putting in the microwave. And when I put it in the microwave, I've got exactly the same fire damage and burn patterns than this young lad experienced in Ireland. And then I found that in the back of the battery pack, there's a little patch, but it wasn't in his phone. So I said to Samsung, what is this? Oh, that tells you if it gets damp or not. Oh, really? So I said, well, go back to this lad and say, did your phone accidentally get wet? And did a friend advise you that he can dry it out or she can dry it out for you? And maybe they had the phone and maybe they put it in the microwave, which he did. So he coughed and he said, okay, it's fair, cop. That's what I did. They let him keep the phone that they gave him. And I said, don't stop at that. I said, make him retract his statement on the blog, which he did, to be fair. So I haven't had any. The other things we see, Steve, is when people buy chargers that aren't matched properly. They're not the manufacturer's chargers for the phone.
I see.
And then you get problems there. But you know the reputable appliances and phones and so on have very good battery management systems to control those batteries.
I see. Now, this young man who suffered these thermal injuries to his leg from that fire.
Yeah.
I'm curious. In a nation of socialized medicine, were you able to X-ray the phone faster, or was the lad X-rayed faster?
Yeah, I can't remember how long it was till we got the phone, but it is nice to be able to get that evidence quickly. But yeah, he was very lucky. He was very lucky. It was,
very much so.
Yeah.
So does using the proper brand equipment reduce the likelihood significantly of fire?
In my findings, Steve, yes, because they're matched up. You know, you've got the right rated adapter or plug or transformer for that appliance. They're married up correctly, and it should control the amount of charge it's getting, the discharge. Because people sometimes don't realise. They think if you overcharge these lithium-ion batteries, that's when the problem is. Well, they can over discharge as well. And if they
interesting.
So when they overcharge or discharge, little branches can form on the within the battery called dendrites, and they're like little stalagmites, stalactites, and so overcharging creates one type of dendrite, undercharging creates another on the two different materials either side of the separator. And because they're rolled up so tightly, if that dendrite punctures the separator, that's when you get the
Right.
direct short circuit. So I've had a hoverboard, one of those hoverboard thingies, where it hadn't been used for, I think, about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. It hadn't been charged up. It was just sitting there for all that time, and it caught fire. So
Spontaneously.
it just took off by itself. So there's a lot of, there's not as much energy punch inside the battery because it's so discharged, but it still did a lot of damage to the property.
And once it goes into thermal runaway, it's probably less important what the charge level is, right? You're still going to
Exactly.
light a room on fire.
Yes, exactly that. It's a naked flame.
Yeah, very interesting. So based on a percentage, I'll put you on the spot here, Peter. iPhone versus Android.
Well, we haven't seen many of either. It's not the phones really that cause the problems. It's the toys.
It's the toys. I see.
Yeah, we'll get that, for instance. We only got to know about that because it was a personal injury claim. So the instructing lawyers shared that with us. But there's a lot out there that goes on that people don't. I think you can see it on YouTube. You've only got to go on YouTube and look at some of these Ring cameras are in people's homes and see their device suddenly exploding. The trouble is they don't tell you what the device is often, and what the charge was. Was it the right charge, or was it what was it make was the device? It's quite spectacular. So yeah, I can't answer that, Steve. Sorry.
Do you have any experience with hydrogen cells?
No.
Okay.
I have not.
Or hydrogen vehicles?
I personally haven't. One of our teams, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿, is our vehicle expert, and he deals with a lot of the high-end vehicles, the multi-million-pound Jaguars and sports cars and Ford F1s and things like this. And he hasn't been involved with many hydrogen. Now I know there are some commercial buses and coaches that have been converted to use hydrogen, but it's not that big over here at the moment. But
I see.
I can
Is
see
that
it.
going to be their new marketing strategy? The power of the Hindenburg under your hood.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I've seen quite a few documentaries about the use of hydrogen, and it sort of makes sense. It's just so expensive to produce at the moment, which is a bit of an inhibitor for mass selling. But my concern with all these EVs is not just a change in technology. I think now Tesla have got a bigger battery cell, and they're even looking at some of these companies at putting some of the battery packs within the chassis and within the actual framework of the vehicle to get more batteries in there, which just writes the car off, I would think. Once you need to replace the batteries, it'd just be so expensive. And then where do they all go?
Right. And what do you do with all the chemicals from them?
Yeah,
when they're expired?
Yeah.
And what gases are released when they burned? And what's the comparative effect of those toxic gases versus the normal gases that you would be released in the course of using a petroleum car?
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, with the gases from the lithium batteries is some are lighter than air and some are heavier than air. So there's no safe. It's not get down low and crawl out, because you could get down low and actually that's the worst place to be. So there's nothing positive about, pardon the pun, one of these batteries going thermal runaway, because they don't always burst into flames, but they do give off this. Once they rupture, they do give off these horrific chemicals.
Yeah, and don't breathe that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what? Do you know what the appropriate type of breathing protection is, other than scuba? Are there filters that will provide protection?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I would say self-contained breathing apparatus, and as far as I know, that's standard operational policy now for all firefighters attending. Well, any car, they should be wearing self-contained, but certainly with these e-vehicles, yeah.
But the people in the area don't tend to have SCBAs with them.
Absolutely
So,
not.
Yeah,
get away.
What are you seeing in wildfire in Great Britain and UK and
Well,
Europe?
I've got a colleague of mine, Rodri Jones, who is leading the way in wildfire investigations and education, because it's something that really hasn't been considered in the UK too much. We don't have the fires like you get in California or south of France, where you've got the tall tree growths and the tall crowns where it will jump across. We've had some terrible fires 2 years ago in London. It was basically almost like a grass fire, and it took out several rows of houses, residential houses. Very difficult to control once you get the wind, but it's not something we see a lot of. And when we do, the effects are normally quite surprising, shall I say, because people don't think, a grass fire and it's not going to do low bushes, it's not going to do much damage, but they just don't realise that flame front and that radiated heat that is preheating the grass and the vegetation in front of it. And with the right wind, it can travel so fast. But they're trying to increase education. I've just sat on a panel a couple of months ago with the Forestry Commission in the UK, looking at training for firefighters and fire investigators. Listening to Richard Woods from Australia, he's the world, in my view, the world expert on wildland fires. And he was saying there's a lot of myths about these fires, how they're starting. A cigarette out of the window. He said, I've tried thousands of cigarettes out of windows. He said they don't go more than 2 feet and they're going behind you, and they don't get into the vegetation, and everything's got to be just right for a cigarette to start a grass fire. Yeah, it's the easy thing to blame. But arson is obviously a big problem. But in the UK, Steve, we don't. I think we're going to see more if this global warming carries on, like it is here at the moment. But in London, yeah, definitely.
Well, do you think it's because it's the British pastime, gardening, that virtually every tree in the country is so manicured that it just can't spread a fire?
I think that's what it is, and the grass is just the right length to stop it. But I succumbed and bought an electric lawnmower. And I didn't. Yeah, I thought, no, I like my petrol lawnmower, but I bought an electric one mainly so my grandson can help me cut the grass. But I've got to keep it to a certain length, Steve, so it doesn't.
Right. And I would imagine that an electric lawnmower is subject to the same battery failures as other electric appliances.
I'm sure it is. And again, this is a good brand. Spent some money on it and use its dedicated charger, and I make sure as soon as that's done, it's switched off, the battery's out of the container, and just keep an eye on it. Yeah, there can be telltale signs with these batteries. If the pouches are starting to swell, if your phone's getting a little bit thicker than it should be, go and get it checked out. That's the thing. But some batteries, and it's human nature. I mean, I did one investigation where it was on a ship and they on a super yacht, and the crew knew that one of the batteries, or a couple of them, were leaking, and they were showing signs of leaking, but it was still holding enough charge. Now, when you're on a charter yacht and the guests want to use those toys every day, and they're coming back, cleaning them off, rapid charge, ready for the afternoon or the next day. When they're showing signs of damage or leakage, there's something wrong with them. If they take that off, chances are they've lost someone's entertainment for an hour or so. Right. So keep 100%. If you've got 4 toys on there and you've got 8 batteries, well, have 12, and have a container, emergency container, to put one in if one is damaged. Put it in the right container. But yeah.
And so those battery storage containers that they sell, the zipper bag, whatnot, they might do some thermal containment, which could actually speed up the fire. They certainly won't contain the gases, but I imagine they could slow down deflagration where the battery's throwing things around the room that start more fires.
And that's the thing, isn't it? And I've heard someone, I'm trying to remember where it was. I don't know if it was NIST or somebody did some tests on these storage bags and boxes, and there was a high failure rate for them. They weren't doing what they were advertised, and that should be publicised more, I think.
Right, well, if this is supposedly some high-tech thing and you can buy it on Amazon for $6, it's probably not going to do much.
Yeah. When I was doing the drone pilot stuff, I had the bags. They weren't massive batteries, but I'd put them in the bags, like the model cars and planes that people use. Put them in the pouch and just seal them. They're quite thick, and it'll probably pop out and contain it, as you say, stop it flying across your garage and setting fire to anything else that's in there. And we've had a couple of those with the model cars, and they often don't have the batteries for those. I'm not into modelling, but they don't have the battery management system. It's often external, and if they don't connect to that, then they can have problems.
Tell me about some of the, I know you've investigated a wide range of fires, including arsons and murders, or murder by arson. Tell me about those cases.
Well, we had, when I was in the fire brigade, we had a young lad that had fallen out with some locals, and these lovely people come around and put some petrol through his letterbox and used matches to get it going, which ended up killing his mother and father. And he managed to climb out the window at the back, but did suffer burns. And we worked very well with the police. In the UK, we don't have fire marshals, so we'll have the fire brigade and the public sector fire investigator that should be working hand in glove with the police, detective, whoever's dealing with that job, and the crime scene investigators. And working together on that job, they managed to get DNA recovery from one of the matches they found, and got a good conviction out of that. And I found that is really was a big problem up to about 2003. London Fire Brigade signed a memorandum of understanding with the Metropolitan Police Service about fire investigations, rather than the fire brigade saying it's a crime, it's not our job, and the police saying it's a fire, we don't really do fire that well. That line in the sand was dissolved, and we did work with each other, and we had some good results. One of the things that we did, my wife was in the Arson task force in London. We developed a 10-stage system for serial arson investigation, and my PhD was on trying to assist fire causation identification to increase the prosecution rate for arson. I mean, that's what it started off to be. But this 10-stage system is a very simple process. It just means gathering the right data, interpreting that data correctly, and then getting responsible people around the table to offer solutions. And we had a serial arsonist, or Claire, my wife, had a serial arsonist that was setting fires, no patterns, no trends, no nothing to say this is going to happen again. There was absolutely no rhyme or reason to it. But it was in an apartment block, and it would be in the bin rooms, it would be in the lift, it would be anywhere where set fires. You could go 14 months and nothing, and then there's a small fire. And how this came to light, and this was going on for 20 years.
Wow.
How this came to light was one of the local fire officers was on a development program, so he heard that this wasn't the first fire there. So he looked back at it, went to Claire and said, I think we've got an arsonist at work here. So Claire went all the way back to before the records that we had in the fire brigade then were documented, and saw all these fires going on. So went through all the stages, had meetings with the tenants, and of course the arsonist is sitting in there as well. So sat round the table, said to the police, that local authority that owned the apartment block, the local fire borough commander, said, we need to put CCTV in the elevator, so that if there's another fire, the fire crew will know. It will come up on their data information. The CCTV gets pulled, and hopefully we'll catch him. 2 weeks later, Steve, there's your man getting the rubbish bags in the lift. I mean, you couldn't have timed it better. Setting fire to the rubbish bags in the lift, and he was caught. So the 10-stage system is not complicated. It's time consuming. It involves a bit of legwork and making people accountable and not passing it on. It's not our job. So she had a lot of results using that system. But yeah, I've been involved with. I've done a lot of firefighter fatalities, which are always tragic to deal with.
Absolutely.
And it was the fire investigation that actually highlighted what went wrong, rather than the accident investigation. You know, accident investigations are absolutely necessary, and they'll look at training and procedures and standard operating procedures and so on. But the fire investigation in several of them pinpoints how did that fire develop so suddenly that they couldn't get out? What went wrong with that fire? So, you know, we've done the origin and cause, but it's the development of the fire. And the last 2 firefighters that died in London, it's actually their 20th anniversary next July, 20th of July, which was probably changed my career, Steve. I spent a long time on investigating that. But once those investigations are completed, it's so important to share the findings. Right. As painful as they are, as brutal as they can be, they've got to be shared to stop it happening again.
Right. Now, I know when you're doing investigations, the scene that you're investigating there has to be some integrity that has to not be contaminated or rifled through by possibly even by crime investigators who don't realize that they're damaging your investigation. I know one of your areas of expertise is fire scene protection, right? How to protect the scene so that it can be well evaluated. Tell me about that process.
So what we now, I always say what we do now, Steve, and I think I'm still in the fire department, you know. So what we were doing back then is training the first responders, including the police, what is important at the scene. So, for instance, if it's a car fire, approach it from a different angle. You know, come in at 45 degrees. Don't come in from the side, which is probably where, if it's an arson fire, where the arsonist would have approached it, sort of straight in and straight out. Come in, protect the ground, so that we might be able to, or the CSI might be able to get a footprint, indent, mould, and things like that. So educating the first responders is crucial, and that should still be getting done. I'm sure it is. Again, with the police, we often would volunteer to go to the police training school to talk to the trainees there, and even the detectives, to let them know some of the myths that exist with fires, you know, with the cigarette and petrol. And we often, I've got some great video of Claire when we were doing some training out in Croatia with a cup of petrol and a cigarette, and because she's puffing over the petrol, everyone's sort of standing back, and then she puts the cigarette out in the petrol, moves the glass, hands it to me, and then I light the cigarette and it flares up. But, you know, it's not the police fault, it's Hollywood's fault, isn't it? You know, how many times you see the cigarette, be thrown on the floor and it bursts into flames. And obviously it doesn't happen.
Now, was that diesel or gasoline?
That's gasoline. Yeah.
Okay.
Gasoline. So
yeah, diesel. You can put out fires with diesel.
Okay. Yeah.
You can, yeah.
I can remember when we were at the training school, to get diesel burning, we had to put a good couple of cups of petrol on top of it to get the
That's right.
And you see that the truck drivers in the winter with little fires underneath their diesel fuel tanks, warm them up.
You know, when they have a cotton bale fire, they immerse the bale in diesel to snuff it out and just wash it out.
Brilliant.
So, I guess when you go into something, you know, looking as a scientist, you could kind of anticipate what you're going to find because fire follows, you know, predictable chemical reaction and propagation. When have you been really surprised by something that you found?
Many times, Steve. And often it's when I do the ad hoc fire test, and I think, wow, I didn't expect that to happen. You know, it's really important. And after all these years, I mean, I was on fire trucks for 18 years at fire stations. I loved driving and putting out fires, and it was great. And I did not want to go for promotion, really. But when I went up to fire investigation for 2 weeks, just to see what it was like, I stayed there for 12 years. I thought it was the best kept secret in the fire brigade. But even after all these years, I'm 24, nearly 25 years now doing fire investigations. I'll always go to every fire investigation as if it's my first one. I'll try not to have any and control any expectation bias whatsoever, any confirmation bias, reverse engineer everything. Okay, that's what it looks like happened. How else could it happen? That's how it looks like it spread. That makes sense it spread like that. I could sell it to the jury it spread like that. But now, what if I could reverse engineer and say, well, it could have also spread this way? And when I do defence work, this is what you're looking at, what the fire investigator or the police officer has brought this case to the court on a prosecution charge. And there's been cases where I've said, yeah, they're absolutely correct. They're right. That is how it started. There have been times I've said, this is dreadful. You know, this poor guy could be going away for minimum 6 years and he hasn't done it. So I always go with a completely open mind, look at all the competent ignition sources. First of all, you've got to define the area of origin, based on burn patterns, ventilation effects, and all that goes with it. The types of materials that were in there, and use everything. You probably heard it, Steve, that fire investigation is a 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, but we haven't got a picture. So we've got to put it together and the picture starts becoming clear. But when it looks like a horse's head, you don't say, I've cracked it, it's a horse's head. You carry on going, it's not. It's, you know, it's another animal, or it's a different picture. So you keep going. Keep your mind completely clear. Try and reverse engineer everything, and try and prove yourself wrong. And that is the best way to do it. But I never go and think, yes, I've seen this before, but this could be completely different. And do the test. Do the test. A quick example, and people listening to this will say, well, that's obvious, isn't it? Well, it wasn't obvious to me, and I put my hands up, you know. And I was with another colleague of mine who was in my team in London Fire Brigade, and we did this together. So it was one of these very inexpensive gas hobs with a little cartridge. You lock in, pull the lever, you know, import from China, and they're probably about $10, $12 to buy. They're nothing. So this guy was on a boat. We have canals over here, and they're called narrowboats, very long narrow boats, and that's exactly what they are. And they're like a little tube inside. So they're using this and making got a kettle on there, making a cup of tea, and he saw flames coming out around the gas control knob. Picked it up to carry it out, and then he got covered in like butane. What was inside, and set him on fire. He jumped in the canal. He was very, very seriously injured. His girlfriend was seriously injured. So, was it misuse or was it a defect? You know, were they using it right? And because
or both, right?
Both. And you know, you should have a certain size pan on there, and I'm thinking, oh well, that's so that the flames don't deflect over the top of the canister, which has got a separation. And perhaps add the kettle, but they put it on halfway. So me and a colleague who was on for another party got together, said, well, let's do the test. Let's get a couple of these. Let's put thermocouples on the cylinder and let's see how hot the cylinder gets when we put the kettle on and put it off centre, so that we push the flames as close as we can to the cylinder. So it was a lovely sunny day. It was 24 degrees, which is amazing in the UK, 24 degrees centigrade. And so I often say to fire investigators, so what temperature do you think we got that cylinder to? And they say, I don't know.
It was working. I mean, it was in operation at the time, right?
Yeah, it's flaming.
So it's naturally cooling itself through the evaporative process inside, right?
Exactly that. So we're saying, what could we get any temperature readings on the outside of that canister? And it went down to 6 degrees, 5 degrees, I think is the lowest it went to, because exactly what you're saying. It's coming out, it's cooling itself. So, of course, when you say to a lot of fire investigators, they say, oh, yeah, well, of course it's, yeah, well, that's obvious. Well, me and my mate Mark, we went, wow, I didn't expect that. I thought we'd get some heat there. Nothing, it really went down. And repeating those tests as well, not just a one-off, repeating it and trying to force it to failure. And we couldn't. And it was clear that there was a defect with the valve and not.
Right.
You couldn't misuse. We tried to misuse it every way we could to get it to go wrong. And that was a successful claim against the manufacturer because of the test we did. So, you always do. You just sometimes say, I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah. Well, if you've seen the frost line form around a propane tank when you use it,
yeah,
you know that if it's freezing the condensation on the tank, it's sub-zero inside.
Yeah, very cold.
Yeah. So what happens when you get a defect, though, a manufacturing defect, but because the product simply has the name of a country on it and not the name of the manufacturer, then how do you trace that back to the manufacturer?
Very, very difficult at times. This hoverboard I had, I looked at I got the sales invoice from people that bought it. The brand make on it was an import from China. So the address was in the UK. It was in London, South London, and it was an apartment block, and they weren't there. It wasn't based there. It was a fictitious address. And of course, you try phoning up I'm not saying that all these companies in China or wherever they are, but they just make so many fake goods and substandard equipment that once we see that, we say to our client, if it's the insured or a law firm that are claiming for personal injury, this is where we're at. Unless you're going to fly a private detective out there, you're not going to find out where this is from. We get in touch. We work with consumer protection groups, electrical safety first, just try and get these rogue appliances, make them aware of it. We've got one with, again, they import them, but they self-brand air fryers. So the air fryers are a big thing, and in one particular type, or it might be a couple of types, there's a problem with the micro switch that goes in, and once it's in, it should switch off and everything else. But the micro switches welding together, you're getting a nice bit of resistance heat in there, which is setting light to the combustible plastic around it, because most of them are plastic, and then up it goes, But I think it's good to when you can identify the component failure of a fire, or the true cause of a fire. And if it is a deliberate act and somebody's rigged an appliance, for instance, and you've CT scanned it or X-rayed it and you can identify that this has been rigged, then they deserve the outcome of their bad actions. They deserve that. But it's quite satisfying when you can perhaps identify the cause of a fire where somebody's been accused of setting a fire. You can say, well, they didn't. this is a failure of this appliance. That's just as satisfying. I think I was saying to you about identifying the area of origin. I did a job out in Latvia in 2013, and it was at the presidential palace. And I was on for the contractors. It's been settled now. I was out there giving evidence in the criminal court for 3 weeks during COVID. I was out there last year for 7 hours, standing up solidly for 7 hours, giving evidence at the civil court. But I disagreed with the police's investigation of where the area of origin was, and I was still they were wrong. But to stand there and defend that in court with not quite hostile but assertive cross-examination, you've really got to make sure that you're happy with your findings and you can defend them in court. And as I said to them, we're never ever going to agree on the cause of this fire because you've got the area of origin wrong. So that went down like a lead balloon. But anyway, it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. Is the bulk of your work now doing expert witness work?
Yeah. I have in the last few years got more involved with some really high profile and massive financial claims. And they're interesting to say the least. They're challenging, but especially when there's multiple parties involved, but it can take the wind out of yourselves because you do so much work on them, Steve. You put all your reports together, your court compliant reports, and in my experience, probably 49 times out of 50, they settle before it goes to court. So, you're all ready and they settle. And you think, I wanted to go to court. I've done all this work. I really want to give evidence, Let's go the whole way. But, yeah.
But it could be the strength of your report that led to the settlement.
Well, and that is the other thing that doesn't happen a lot is, we've built up some great clients now that will come to us for all things fire. But often when they've settled, they can't discuss it. Legally, they won't tell you the outcome, or and I might say something simple like, is your client satisfied with the outcome? You might get a very, and that's it. So you think, okay, well, we did a good job. But doing cold case reviews is challenging as well. When you can't go to the scene and you're relying on other people's photographs and reports, that's challenging. But I like a challenge.
That's wonderful.
So the oldest fire I've investigated, Steve, is the Great Fire of London. And that was just before it was 350 years anniversary. And
what were things like back then?
Well, the amazing thing, what it was, I was in the fire brigade at the time, and I was going to the British Library, studying from a PhD and doing that research. And while I was there, they had the real historical archives room where you have to wear the cotton gloves and look at things. And they had the parliamentary report for the Great Fire of London. So I looked at that. The reason I looked it up is because we had a documentary channel over here that they did a series of programs, and it was called Bloody Foreigners, and it was all about British history and how we embraced foreigners when it suited us and we turned our backs on them when it didn't suit us. So when you look at 1666, and the year before we had the plague in London, it was full of people from Holland, from Netherlands, from France, all around the world, because it was a port. It was an active port in the city of London. And we were at war with the Dutch. So when the fire occurred, a lot of people that lived in London turned on the Dutch and the French and so on. So this Channel 4 documentary guy says to me, why would, because we hanged a Frenchman for setting the fire. So why would somebody admit to setting a fire when they didn't? So I said, well, how do you know he didn't? So he said, well, that's not what I'm asking you. So I said, well, people do all sorts of things, admit to things they didn't do for notoriety and whatever. And that piqued my interest. So I thought, I've got to investigate this now. So I got the parliamentary report and looked and saw that it was never investigated, Steve. It was never properly investigated. But there was, and if you Googled, did a search on the Great Fire of London, Robert Hubert that was hanged, nearly every website will say, but he wasn't even in London. His ship didn't come into London until the next day, which is not true. He was in London 2 days before the fire. He had means, motive, opportunity. He confessed not only to the chef, to his family member. So there you go. It sounds pretty guilty to me. But in today's courts, I think it would have it probably not been proved. But anyway,
so if he wanted to confess, let's say he considered it a heroic act on behalf of his country that he was able to cause so much damage, and so he confessed for the credit, even though the price he would pay for that would be severe.
Yeah.
Could there be a case where you were able to disprove someone's confession?
Yes. That's
right?
an interesting one. Yeah.
Are there cases where someone confesses and you can prove, no, actually you didn't do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what happened, this is only a few years ago, and I did a defence, I did a fire investigation for the defence, for the defendant. And as I said in court for this particular guy, I don't know him, no disrespect, I don't care to know him, and he may well have set the fire. He may well have set the fire. I said, but there's more evidence to show this was an accidental fire. So it's not beyond reasonable doubt. You know, there was a lot of reasonable doubt that it wasn't him and everything. But anyway, because of that one, and he never confessed to setting it, because of that one, the barrister that was there moved up to north of England. He recommended me to look at this other case of a young lad that admitted setting a fire that killed a guy in a male hostel. And so I said, what do you want me to do? He's admitted it, the guy's dead. What do you want me to do? He said, Peter, please just look at it, look at the evidence. So I did. And I spent days and days and weeks on this, Steve, because the more I looked at it, and I thought, why is he admitting doing this? He couldn't have done what he said he'd done. And the crux of it was one of the tenants that died was on the ground floor. The other tenants on that ground floor all climbed out of the window. They could climb out. It was on the ground floor. The fire was in the corridor. He made a run for it. He made a personal decision to make a run for it, and he tripped over and caught his head on the skirting board, and that's what knocked him out. So he was overcome by smoke inhalation. So I clearly showed all this and put the report together, which takes an age. Put the report together. It went to the court. And by the way, when you do defence work or legal aid work, you either do it pro bono or, you know, the money is rubbish. That's why a lot of people don't take it on. But I say to my team, there's 11 of us, try and do at least one what we call legal aid job a year, because it sharpens you up and it shows impartiality. You know, I don't care if it's defence or prosecution. Anyway, it went to the judge, and the judge said if it wasn't for my report, there'd have been a very expensive murder case. Whereas he was charged with manslaughter and hopefully got the help he needed, because he had mental health issues, without doubt. But that was an interesting case. But it's quite satisfying to say, you know, he's got issues. He may well have been involved in setting the fire with these other group of Herberts, I call them, that he was covering for, because he was the only one that was charged, because he admitted it. But it was shown that he didn't murder the guy. He couldn't have done, because all the guy had to do was step out the window, like the others.
Right. Well, you've had quite the illustrious career there. I don't know I can offer you much career advice, except to say that if you do expert witness work in the United States, it pays very, very well, comparatively.
That's nice to know. That's nice to know. I've got
Yeah.
um, where was it? Somewhere up north. There were some riots up uh, northern state, right near Canada border, and I was involved in doing a review for that because they wanted an impartial review, and the attorney there was originally from England, so he got in touch with me, and I got
I
involved with
see.
it. So
Wonderful.
yeah,
Well, Dr. Mansi, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. What a pleasure to get to speak with you.
it's been great to meet you at last, Steve, and thanks for all you do with sharing all this knowledge and experience with people.
Well, thanks for bringing the knowledge and the experience, right? And we see so much publicity around a fire itself, but as you said, what's more important is that we spread the lessons from each fire.
Yes,
So as you amass new lessons from new fires, please reach out to me. I'd love to put the word out on
sure,
what people need to know to stay safe, especially in the fire service.
sure.
So
Absolutely, yeah.
thank
Thank
you.
you, Steve.
Thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah,
Folks, you have spent a lovely hour, I hope, with Dr. Peter Mansi and myself. You've been watching or listening to The Fire Break. Take good care of yourself. Be safe. We'll see you at the next one.